the fence sitting, Michael, you'll probably speak to that a little bit, won't you?
Correct. And yeah, last week we had some folks that were rolling in at like 10 or 15 after. So I wouldn't be surprised if we had a few more folks roll in. We had a couple that are dropped off. So hopefully they'll join us again in a minute. But yeah, it's that waiting, and it's something that I've had to talk to a lot of people about. I think it's natural human psychology to wait for landmark dates. That's why we as a species like to wait until the first of the week on Monday or first of the month or first of the year to make goals and pursue those. And I think it's no different with an election, just the same way it was no different when the Fed made their announcement a few weeks ago, the way it was no different when we were in COVID. And so it's something that we've had to talk through. But I think at the end of the day, yeah, it's finding out exactly why people are wanting to do something and why should we allow some sort of barrier or perceived barrier get in the way, because one way or the other, you've got a goal that you want to achieve. Why are we going to allow external factors to really prevent that? So,
Yeah. And I will say that just to set up this call a little bit, I know we're talking about overcoming objections, and last week we talked about, and I wasn't on the call last week, I was traveling, but I know you all talked about online leads. And I feel like so many of us do work online leads. So it's such a not everyone, newer agents usually are not unless they're on a team, which is fine. Um, you know, I've done some coaching with different coaching companies myself. Michael and I both have a real estate coach, and we've coached with the top coaching companies out there. And I know people through networking with around the country and who's the best of the best and like giving TED Talks on lead conversion and all this stuff. I will put Michael up against every one of them as far as lead conversion and overcoming objections goes. And I think that our team and myself especially has been just, amazingly blessed to have him as part of our as in our sandbox and getting to be around him because I will tell you he's on the other side of this wall for me right now and sometimes he's making so many calls it just gets annoying. I have to close my door. But as the team lead, I'm like I don't want to discourage that. And so it's just one of those things that, the simplicity of lead conversion and people try to overanalyze it. And, I will hear agents that say, well, they'll stare at the lead details forever before they pick up the phone and then they don't answer. And it's like, well, why did you waste 10 minutes trying to study things? And it really is just repetition. And so, but I think this is a great topic. I know, Michael, you're going to try and make this a little more interactive. So hopefully more people jump on and we can get this going. But I'll turn it over to you. I think it's going to be a great call and a lot of good, valuable information for sure on, and it is what he puts in place and trains our team agents to do that helps us, become a team every year that sells over $100 million from real estate. I mean, we do that year in year out, and the majority of our business is past clients and online leads. So that overcoming objections is awesome, and I really do think Michael is one of the best of the best. So turn it over to you.
cool. Well, I know last week there's so much content, like lead conversion and developing and getting better at it is one of those things that it's a learned habit and skill that just over time, and it makes me really happy when folks jump on this call that have been in production for quite a while and know their way and can navigate their way around real estate and know how to have the conversations, but are a little still looking to get actively better at it. And so we've had a couple of folks jump on, and just out of curiosity, Abe, do you work online leads? Like, what is your primary lead source that you actively work?
I'll say,
Sorry.
Michael, too, that sometimes people may be driving and off camera.
Yeah,
So
that's fine.
if you are driving, we don't want you to be on camera. So be
Yeah.
safe.
So today, the content that we went over last week, content that we went over
Bye.
last week, by the content that we went over last week, Claire, you were on, and you got an opportunity to present. Unfortunately, your mic was acting up a little bit, and I'm glad we're getting a little bit more clarity because I want to make this interactive. But there's just so much information. But I said that it was going to be important that we segment it out, and I think one of the things that we had a conversation with I think it was Kip Callahan with Chicago Title. He said that all the people want to learn about right now is lead gen. And I think what falls right behind that is lead conversion and specifically overcoming objections. So we'll get into that. But Claire, I know that you're working Ylopo, and I know that you work online leads, and you said that you've got some folks on the fence. So what are some of the common kind of objections, and specifically the objections that you're getting that are causing people to not want to make any sort of firm decisions right now?
I think that predominantly it's a rate conversation, but then it's also somewhat prices. I've had a number of different people asking me if I think that if we're going to see prices go down. And I have universally said no. I mean, we might see properties sit on the market a little bit longer. We might see price reductions for properties or negotiated price or contract reductions. But generally speaking, those properties might have been slightly inflated to begin with upon coming and entering the market. But no, I don't think North Texas doesn't typically see dips. I mean, we just don't see them go down, and notably, it's not going to be a 20% dip or anything crazy like that. So that's probably the most objective, or most objections that I see. And then also people that are making offers, they're wanting to make offers that are just ridiculously low. And I'm like, guys, this is a waste of everybody's time. And it's insulting to the seller to the point where they're not going to be willing to work with us. So yeah.
Navigating those conversations can be a little bit challenging, too. It's like, well, if they're going to want to work, then we're going to start here. And I'm with you. I've got folks that will say, I want to start on the very low end and like work towards getting into the middle. Well, you may not even have an opportunity to get in the middle if your initial offer is so offensive. And it's a way of doing things that's been a little bit different, and buyers and sellers catch up to market changes at different stages. And I'm kind of with you. I don't think that we expect housing prices to ever like truly go down in DFW. We're insulated away from other markets due to the amount of growth that's happening here. And it's exponential. And with everything that they've announced that's happening up north, up in Lake Texoma, it's just going to continue to build and build and build. And now people aren't having to drive all the way into Dallas to go to work with corporate headquarters. A lot of those corporate headquarters are in Frisco and in Plano. So you can drive, to darn near almost Sherman as fast as you can in Dallas in certain situations if you're trying to get to those areas. So I don't think that we're going to experience any sort of downturn, but it's, again, while we're talking, I think that we have a level of expertise and input and things like that we rely on. But I think what agents have a tendency to do is get defensive when those are given those specific objections, or I've heard this same story so many times. I don't want to talk to it again. But how we receive that and how we articulate it in our advice is the most important thing. And you have to earn that trust. And that's what we talked about last week, is what's so important is building up trust so that you say, the advice that I give you on this stuff, I don't want you to think that it's just me trying to sell you on anything. It's good, sound advice, and I'm giving it to you because I care about you and I want to see you achieve your goals. I don't think that we can even get to that point if we don't understand why they're trying to do what they're trying to do. Tell me, why it is that you're looking at doing what you're talking about doing. And you've got to be able to go to 3 to 5 layers deep on every little thing. Not saying that you have to do that with everybody, but you've got to earn enough to where you think, all right, I'm going to give you my input on the market and what I think is going to happen. But I need to make sure that you understand that I'm coming from a place of honesty and being earnest, as opposed to just trying to sell you on something. And that's where the line gets drawn between creating urgency through motivation and just being salesy. And Brent, do you want to jump in? You have anything that you want to chime in on that specifically?
No, I agree with you completely, honestly. So it's yeah, no, I'm good on that one.
So outside of just getting those objections, do you think, Claire, that you have any specific other bottlenecks? Like, are you finding that you have people that are wanting to work with you, and are they having a hard time getting approved, or are they getting approved and having a hard time committing to writing an offer because of things like what they're seeing, their estimated monthly expenses? Are they hesitant on pulling the trigger at different stages? Where are you seeing your bottleneck specifically?
On my buyers, I think that um, I've got a lot of people who, when I got them, they were very early in their process. And so they don't have a huge sense of urgency right at this moment. Now, what's going to probably happen is all of them are probably going to become active the second that I try to go on vacation.
Yep.
Because that's just what happens. And I've been doing this long enough to know that the best way to generate the most amount of activity is to plan a vacation. So
It's amazing that we don't plan more of them.
right, really. So I've got a lot of people who they've got leases that are coming due, or the ones that are really motivated. I've got one right now who we're working with a credit repair situation to get, something that's been paid off of her report. She's very motivated, but we're stuck with that little dilemma. My other super motivated people, I can't get the listing to sell. We've had it on the market. It's aged. I've gotten new photos. I've made price reductions. I've changed descriptions. I've sent out reverse prospecting. It's maddening to me because it's an amazing house. I have done probably, I don't know, 10-ish open houses.
Mm. What's the address?
5800 Broken Spur in McKinney.
Do you ever get that feeling, because you're obviously working really hard to get it sold? Do you ever get that feeling that like it's kind of like beating yourself up even when it's not warranted? Like, oh my gosh, it's all my fault. Like, do you ever get like some sense of discouragement or frustration and think like,
yeah, and these people, I have worked with these people for well over 10 years. I mean, these are multiple past client for me, and they really, they're frustrated. We've had
Pretty.
yeah, it's a great house. I don't know what the problem is. I've even I asked my lender to pull their appraisal from their purchase so that I could verify the square footage. I mean, am I like, or whatever, you know what I mean? There's been a ton of different things that I'm really racking my brain because I don't know what else to do besides wait for the right buyer. And the right buyer will come eventually.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too far off Michael's topic here, but we've been using the Showcase product. We were invited by Zillow to be part of that, and that's been it's certainly helpful on getting the listing. I had one in Richardson, which was not near as pretty as yours, and we started at like 680. It's landing on 630 is where it's landing, and it's about to close in a week, I believe. And it needed work and it needed some updating, but we added it to Showcase, and then immediately the saves and I a lot of people will say Zillow is the enemy. They're not a real estate company, they're a data company. And
Right.
and my background's computer science, and I love seeing all this, and they do give you great information. And when you see the saves and the views and stuff really start going way, way, way up, and but then again, we go in and we draw you have a $4,000 price cut. Did you get an immediate showing after that, or did it just continue to sit?
It continued to sit, and I had a steady amount of traffic during the open house last weekend. And I mean, I was actually looking over my sign-in sheet, and I mean, the last folks that were in there expressed a lot of interest in it, and they were working with someone. You know, their agent has not reached out to me, so I don't know.
What are you offering buyer agent compensation?
Yep, we sure are.
3%?
Yep. Mhm.
We were too. And it really just came down to, it seems like when we're talking about overcoming objections and things like that, we have to, it's very important on the listing side to set those expectations up front. It's like, hey, your house is beautiful, but when I'm looking at this price point at 635, this is where people start getting into, man, that payment's going to be a lot right now.
Yeah,
With
is.
homeowners insurance and with interest rates, and just really, so I think that I would be really curious, and I would love us to circle back next week after we see who becomes president to see if your phone starts ringing.
I agree.
Yeah, so I think that has some of that. And when we talk about, again, overcoming objections, gosh, that's one of the biggest ones we've got right now. And as real estate agents, we're sitting here going, we want to know too.
Yeah.
Because it's, and I've had people tell me, like, your choice, you're just thinking about yourself. And I'm like, I said, I'm also thinking about all my clients and all my past clients. Like, this impacts homeownership, impacts us all, one way or another.
Right.
And so it's, but then again, I had another listing that was multiple offers right away. Well, guess what? And it was turnkey, just like this one. But guess what? The list price was like 350. So big difference, right? But this is McKinney. It's in a great area. I'm sure I'm, a lot looking at comps. I'm sure it's comped fine. Mine was comped fine at 680. So it's just setting realistic expectations. Hey, this could take a while. We don't have a crystal ball. We're doing everything we can. And you start getting those questions. You're overcoming objections from your sellers. It's like, hey, what are you doing to sell my house? You're doing everything you can. There is inventory right now. And a normal market, what is 6 months, right? So you're at 100 days. You're just over 3 months. It's not crazy. What are your average days on market in your neighborhood for this one?
I'd have to go back and
That's fine.
pull it. Yeah.
It's fine.
But
So,
we are one of the larger homes in this neighborhood, and that has something to do with it as well. It is a full, like, 3-bedroom, 2-bath on the first floor. And then there's 2 more bedrooms and a bathroom and a media or a loft.
That's great.
I mean, it's a great floor plan. It's a great house, but it's a big house for that neighborhood.
I think, yeah, I would say that the one thing about Zillow and their data is every time you do a price drop, there's estimate lowers. It continues. I've had someone, and I can't remember who it was, but it was like 1.5 million, and then they dropped it to like 700,000, and this estimate dropped to like 680. Just to try and do something silly with the pricing. And so, but it really does follow that trend. It continues to go down. That can be helpful with getting price drops from your seller. So it wasn't in our case, but you're doing all you can. On the buyer side of things, and Michael, I hope you don't mind me jumping in here. Whenever you say people are early in the process, things like that, when it comes to lead generation, that is very typical, because I do think it depends on the lead source. So when you're talking about, you use Ylopo, so that's going to be pay-per-click, things like that. That generally has a longer maturity time for that lead to become serious. And again, I think those objections that Michael's going to jump into on just digging into people's why and asking those probing questions is really important. And it really is just filling that pipeline. You're going to see the average turn time of a Ylopo lead is probably more in the year to year and a half range. And where Zillow maybe 6 to 12 months range, and sometimes it's even further out than that as well. So people have this they think realtor.com and Zillow is just like the end all be all with leads, and it's really not. That being said, Michael, I know set a ton of appointments last week. We use showing partners and things like that, so our time is not spent out opening doors so we can prospect more. And Michael is having different types of lead sources giving different types of objections, right, Michael?
Yeah, and you get that question a lot, and I think so much of this is a mental thing, not just like our attitude. And it's not just like, oh, when you're making calls, like make sure you're smiling and things like that. I think it's how you approach things. Like, for example, it drives me crazy when people say that they're calling Google PPC, like online registration leads, and calling it cold calling. That is not cold calling. Cold calling is pulling a phone book and pulling up a phone number at a phone book and calling somebody. Cold calling is calling potentially FSBOs. Every single person that has registered online has raised their hand. They want help. We should never feel burdened by trying to help them out. And I've talked to agents, and this is where I kind of I have to check myself a little bit, because I've done this for so long that, to me, things that I think are easy, do I take it for granted because other people have not experienced that much of that before? But it's almost like, can you delineate between what you think is common sense and critical thinking versus something that maybe people don't recognize? And things like calling at 8 a.m, things like calling between 11 and 1, things like calling, I was up text messaging Monday night. I was sitting there, was it Monday or Monday night? No, I can't remember. Anyway, it was one of the nights I'm sitting there watching the baseball game. It's like 8:45. I'm starting to text leads. And a lot of people would frown upon that, but it's like, look, man, if you're buying a house, you have to have a source of income, and most people are working during the day. And so when are you going to get a hold of them? And I think that we are programmed as a society to believe that you've got to work from 8 to 5. I mean, we get clients or we get leads that are just like, oh, well, when I ask them like, hey, when can I call you back? They're like, well, I don't know if you're going to be available after 5 o'clock. Like, do you understand what I do? Like, I want to talk to you, but um, there's a psychology behind it that I think is super important. And I think that anybody that goes onto a website and starts looking at homes, there's a good chance that they've already probably talked to somebody else, and they're actually further along in the process than we think that they are. All that is hanging them up is they don't know how to get from point A to point B. Because you think about your pool of people that are going to transact. I mean, roughly 46% of all buyers are first-time home buyers. They probably don't know like what this looks like, what they need to do, how they need to get prepared. And then out of that other 54% or so, how many of those are people that probably have bought a house before but have never been through the process of buying and selling? So I think it's just something where they just don't know what that next step needs to look like. And it's our job to help them bridge that gap between point A and point B. But how do you do it in a way that's not salesy, where you're just like, you should do this, you should do this? Because I do hear agents sometimes when they get somebody on the phone, especially over the last year and a half, somebody says, well, I'm concerned about the rates. Well, you shouldn't be, because you can buy a house now, date the rate and marry the house, and it's like all those little cliche things, but man, that comes off as very salesy. And I think a lot of it is tone deaf, because we are not putting ourselves into that other person's shoes, and we're not validating their concern by saying, that's valid concern. I hear what you're saying. I mean, hell, you look at Mortgage News Daily, and right now it's got the 30-year fixed average rate back to 7.02. It was 6.1 a month ago. And so it's a valid concern that we have. And I think that where we can overcome objections to a lot of those things is not to respond like a hip draw, or like shoot from the hip, or knee-jerk reaction to things and get defensive. And that's where I think a lot of agents have a flaw, is that they think that I'm the expert, you should listen to what I say, but that can be incredibly off-putting. What we need to think about is, like, if we're in those people's position, if I'm going on looking at houses, somebody gives me a call and then immediately they tell me I'm dumb for thinking that it's a bad time to buy a house, I don't want to work with you, period. Not even just like right now. I will find somebody else to work with that's not going to make me feel that way. And so overcoming objections isn't even so much of a script or a way of saying things. I know I talked about that last week. It's like it's so important to say what this would mean to you is this. That is the thing that's going to resonate. But we're never going to get to that point if we don't understand where they're coming from. You know, like, all right, cool. You know, I get on the phone with somebody, they say, yeah, I'm not looking until like May or June of next year. Cool. When the time is right, what is it that you're going to be looking to do? Let's talk about you first. Let me ask you a few more questions. Help me to understand your position, where you're coming from. How long has this been something you've been thinking of doing? Who have you told about this? Is it you and your spouse, any children? What's the rationale for doing it? Have you had any experience with this before? Have you had any interaction or experience with an agent? If you have, what do you expect from an agent that you choose to work with? These are the questions that generally are not asked by real estate agents that are working online leads. That in and of itself is going to make you differentiate yourself among the crop. It's like anybody can call and just say, all right, cool. You're looking at McKinney. You're looking at a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, about 2,000 square feet. Great. I'm going to send you this list and I need you to let me know if you see anything that sticks out so we can go ahead and look at it. That is the worst way to try to convert leads. And then if they say, oh, well, I'm concerned about the interest rate, I'm going to hold off until next year. You have a lot of agents that are concerned of getting rejected too. And they're just like, well, okay, cool. Well, I'll call you in 6 months. Let me know if you have any questions. That's terrible. Like, ask more questions and try to understand where they're coming from. And when we talk about creating urgency, I go back to that point where I say a lot of people just don't know. The news, the media, Facebook, Instagram, all these things are telling them it's a bad time to buy. But we all as professionals that know what we can do, what we're capable of in this market, it's actually, in my opinion, a really good time for buyers to buy. It's going to be a horrible time for people to buy next summer when they're holding off and waiting. I think that what we're going to deal with is all the people that are looking at price points between the 200s and the 400s are going to get priced out of DFW in the next year or two. That is not going to exist. Those folks, unfortunately, are going to have to co-live, or they're going to have to change and move to a different market. If you're not talking about buying right now, you're hurting yourself. But we can't tell them that way, especially not in the first 2 or 3 minutes of a conversation when we've never spoken to that person. So when somebody tells me, yeah, I'm looking at June or July of next year, one of the other questions I may ask is, great. Tell me a little bit about that timeline and why that works best for you. That is probably one of the most powerful questions that any one of us can ask when it comes to timeline. Tell me more about that timeline and why that works best for you. Because you're agreeing with them. You're not selling them on trying to buy anything. You're just trying to understand. It's a curious mindset. Then they'll talk to you. They'll say things like, oh, well, you know, I'm trying to save up for enough of a down payment, or I'm waiting on the interest rates, or I've got a lease, any number of things that we hear all the time. Okay, tell me a little bit more about that. What's your concern? Probe and probe and probe, ask more questions, and then bring it back to that where you say, look, appreciate you sharing all this with me. I don't know if you were expecting a call right now, but thank you so much. I want to bring it back to what you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation. Look, your timeline is your timeline. It's not my job to push on that. We have agents that I've seen that think that the way to convince somebody that they're not salesy is to tell them right off the bat that they're not salesy. That makes you salesy. Oh, hey, I'm not a super pushy salesy person. You're putting something into somebody's brain that may not have already been there. Now they're thinking about it. And then they start thinking, well, is this person the right person to be talking to? Because they're trying to sell me on this thing. It's just like the buyer rep issue that we're having right now, because a lot of people want to talk to that and get that out of the way right off the bat. It's not appropriate time to do it. And you're making this whole relationship the biggest investment somebody's going to make in their entire life about a piece of paper. And that is so silly to do. We have a time and a place to talk about that. What I want to do is talk about you, get to know you, build up a little bit of trust, understand that we're both friendly with one another. Then I want to bring that back. And I want to say, you told me that you're talking about moving in June or July of next year. You told me the reason why is that you're concerned about the interest rate. If you knew that I could get you into a house right now with a rate that's a little bit more appropriate for what you're looking for, and to give you enough time to refinance it at some point later down the road and have that paid for by the seller, is that something that you'd want to look at? Well, of course I'd want to look at that. Well, there are these things called temporary buy downs, or one of the things that I do is negotiate on your behalf. You can say it however you want, whatever your elevator pitch is. I'm a really good negotiator. What that means to you is that we could actually get you in a house now as opposed to waiting and get you ahead of the rush next year. How does that sound to you? Well, it sounds great. All right, here's what I'd love to do. It will make a little bit more sense if I can show you what I'm talking about. And then you jump on a virtual call, you schedule a virtual call. That's your time to close, set the expectation for the entire relationship, get them bought in, actually show them an example like, hey, I have a pre-owned home that I helped close, and this is how much I was able to get in concessions. I was able to help somebody put money in their pocket to break their lease. I got them an interest rate buy down. That is overwhelmingly a massive win for buyers.
Michael,
And we
can you
I'm gonna
talk more? Michael, can you talk more about what you just said on showing them an example? So you're jumping on a Zoom, or if you don't have Zoom, Google Chat or something, and you're sharing your screen with them, right?
Mhm.
So what are you're actually going into MLS and you're showing them that the concessions are in there? Is that what you're doing? You're showing them a contract? What are you doing?
Yeah, and I'll actually show you guys here real quick if I can share my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a pre-owned home that I sold earlier this year. It's one of a few of them, but what I do is if I get somebody on a virtual call and I talk to them and I say, like, let's say it's 30 minutes long, that first 10 minutes is just revisiting relationship building. Again, my primary focus is building trust with you. And Claire, one of the things I think that you and I and Brent need to talk offline about is what you said about like, oh, I've had to work so many open houses and your kids and things like that. We're going to talk to what we're doing is leverage right now with time. And if you're converting online leads, it's something I think you might want to talk about. We'll get to that in a little bit. But anyway, so then the next 10 minutes, the meat and potatoes of that conversation is to say, hey, when we talked on the phone a couple of days ago, you told me that you want to move. You're just waiting for the right time. You said that you've got a lease that ends in June. You don't want to have to pay to break your lease because you're paying $2,500 a month for that. But you're also worried about the rate. And I told you that I wanted to show you an example of that. Yes. Okay, cool. Here's a house that I closed earlier this year. You see, it was a list price of $450,000. One of the things that I do as an agent is understand every house has its own story. I'm going to find it out. And I'm going to find out what leverage that I can find for you. The best deals are the ones that are advantageous for everybody. What you said earlier, Claire, about the gap between certain buyers and sellers is so big that you can set an expectation of how this is all going to work. And it's getting people bought into like, oh, this is realistic. What people don't realize when they're doing this is you're actually taking one of the biggest steps towards lead conversion and getting somebody to move forward without them even realizing it. You're in effect showing a house at this point. You've skipped a bunch of steps and you're getting somebody to do this. That's going to make it so much easier to get them bought into doing things, because then they're going to realize, oh, I was just online looking at houses online. Now all of a sudden I'm kind of like actually looking at a house online and talking to a real estate agent and having a conversation and putting a plan together that I didn't expect to happen and really didn't want to, because I thought it was going to be off-putting and salesy. You're actually doing that at this point. You have step by step getting them bought into you. Now, $450,000 house, I'll scroll down and I'll show them, look, I got them $13,500 in concessions for this house. You know what that meant to these folks? They were able to go ahead and break their lease, put in their 60-day notice. They were able to pay their reletting fee, and they had all this money left over. We got the seller to pay for the title policy, the survey. They kicked in some furniture, and I got them the flexibility to get a 2-1 buy down. Their monthly payments might have been around $3,400. They got them down to about $2,600 in the first year. They could have gotten it closer to about 3,000 and then had a little bit extra cash to pay for their prepaids, like on their closing and things like that. But that does not happen in even a normal market. You got to be able to look at it and say, I'm not here to push on you to tell you that you should buy a house right now. What I'm trying to show you is that your decisions and the approach that you're taking to this has some effect based on when you do it. We have an opportunity to do this right now. Does this change your perspective on your timeline at all? And if they say no, that's fine. Cool. You know what? You don't want to move forward. I respect that. I want to put a plan in place to make sure that we're communicating. But if that does change your mind, then we're going to talk about homework. I want you to go ahead and talk to a lender now, and I'm going to send you a few houses. I want you to look at them. I want you to let me know which ones you want to go and see this week. Because at that point, again, you've not been salesy. You've shown them these things. You've made sense out of it. Again, you're closing that gap between point A and point B. And they're starting to realize that it's possible.
Yep.
Like, oh, I can actually do this. And at that point, boom, it's done. You've got them bought in. You're going to take somebody that told you 2 days ago that said that they weren't going to buy a house until June or July. Most agents would say, cool, I'll call you back in like May or June or whatever. So now somebody that's going to transact within the next month. That's how you create urgency.
Yeah, Michael, I think that for like you said earlier, everyone's got their own reasons, but what you're doing is you are showing value, and you're essentially already working for them. And what we've seen, being a team owner, I have had a lot of agents come and go from the team. And I would say 95% of them are either doing way worse than they were on the team, or they're out of real estate completely. And, a lot of when it comes to teams, and this is going to be a little crass, and I don't mind being that way because that's me. But, people think the grass is always greener on the other side. And we like to say that that's because it's fertilized and bullshit. So it's it really is. And that's fine. And we have a lot of people, but what we see from a lot of agents, because a lot of times we'll sit there and say, like, hey, who's my biggest competition when it comes to lead generation? Because you're fooling yourself. If they go to Ylopo, Claire, and they register, because let's be honest, it's a forced registration. They're still agreeing to put their information in there. Of course, we get the Donald Ducks and the Mickey Mouses and things like that, but we do get real numbers and real names. And but we're fooling ourselves to think that that's the only website they're doing that on. They're doing that on probably 10 other websites. So it's up to us to be so sharp at overcoming objections and showing our value that we're able to beat those other people out. Because realistically, we can go to those MIT or Harvard stats or whatever it is that says the amount of agents that call more than once is like almost zero. What times a days and things like that. I think some of that, I'd love to see them do that study over again with all the technology that we have now with text messaging and things like that. But, we are seeing that agents don't try and call leads more than once or twice. They really don't. And they see that as a burden. So going into it with that mindset is going to defeat you every single time. Michael came from a sales position where he was in higher ed and enrolling people into college. And, he didn't get paid any more. When he did all this, he would do however many he'd enroll and do 10x whatever everybody else is doing. He wasn't making any more money. Now he's coming into real estate and going, it's like, are you kidding me? You're telling me I can sit there and make phone calls and talk to these people and make more money based on, he's like, man, I'm gonna do this all day long. I love it. If we could clone Michael and make 100 Michaels, it would be like the best real estate team in the world. So, but he's an oddball. That's an outlier. That's not what people love to do. But it really becomes, if you can change your mindset and sit down and do the work and actually care about people's whys. That's why I've had plenty of people that will say, once I'm done with the deal, I'm done with those people. I'm like, whoa, like, do you even care about them at all? And when we talk about who is our biggest competition in real estate, it is not, the next big team that's next to you. That's not your competition. It's the 35,000 agents in DFW that sell 2 houses a year. That's your competition. And who are you going up against? And it's, everyone knows a real estate agent. Everyone does. Oh, I'm going to work with my cousin. There's objection handling for that. But you also don't want to be too pushy on things like that, because it's like, that's great. Keep us in mind. Do you mind if I show you, hey, I've got an agent? A lot of times with online leads, that objection, hey, I've got an agent already, they really don't. It's a defense mechanism for them. And you can probe into that. And, I know it depends. You want to ask that question a little more gingerly. It's like, hey, so are you just looking online? Are you going to open houses? How are you getting that? Oh, yeah, just looking online. Cool. If they said they're going to houses and they're seeing in person, now you're kind of getting an idea they may have an agent without asking them directly, do you have an agent? Because we're supposed to back off, right? So I just feel like where Michael's coming from, and he's saying like, hey, I hear you. I hear what's important to you. Let me recap our conversation at the end, which is very important. I think it takes it a step further if you say, hey, and also I'm going to send you an email recap too. And I'm going to text you, hey, this is my business line, because, if you're Ylopo or whatever you're using, it's probably a business phone number. Have your contact card like I do in my phone. Hey, do you have an iPhone? I'll just share my contact. Some people use Hi Hello, which is another one, just to zap it over. I don't carry business cards anymore. Technology. And so that being said, he is demonstrating value. And we feel like getting people to that virtual meeting is way less threatening than the old school way of doing things. Hey, let me buy you a cup of coffee and let me sit in traffic forever. And they have to sit in traffic forever just to come meet you. And what happens? You get there and they cancel. Right. So it's one of those things that virtual meeting is so critical. And again, Michael will get again offline, Claire, if you want to, is how we're leveraging our time and we're positioning ourselves to be what's called their chief. Michael calls it his chief strategy officer, the CSO. I just say we're the chief strategist for you. That's our job. We're here to get you in the house and negotiate. I'm personally more of like a bulldog when it comes to that stuff. I love to get in there and just like twist the knife a little bit and get the best deal I possibly can. And Michael's good at that too. That being said, though, we leverage showing partners through Shawami, which is we interview them. We know how to do it the right way, but we have agents that are starting to do this on our team now, and they want to use it so they spend more time with their family and have their weekends free. It's not to prospect more. They're happy with what they're selling. Their goal is their goal. That doesn't matter. Michael's goal, my goal is like, let's sell as many houses as we can. Our real estate coach, his name's Patrick Keller in Indianapolis, and he sells like 165 houses a year by himself through this partner model. And so, our goal for next year between me and Michael in 2025, probably depending on the election next week, is like 50 million, just the two of us, and it's game changing for us, and it's game changing for our families. And to be able to do that and this model, and we're getting, like I said, getting off topic a little bit, but this model is the most profitable thing you will do. And we will be doing in-person trainings once a month. And one of those topics is going to be team building and how to do it right and how to leverage your time and talk about all this stuff in person here in Plano. And so we're pretty excited about all of that, and just having really great speakers come, and almost like mastermind / workshop type of stuff. So anyway, I'm gonna time out there. I know we've got 9 minutes ish. Michael, is there anything else you want to do before we start seeing if Claire's got any questions, etc.?
Yeah, I just, I think it's important, again, the key characteristics of creating urgency. Overcoming objections is one thing, but creating urgency by overcoming objections just has to do everything with building trust, being different, showing them, as opposed to just talking to it and getting buy-in that way. And I think when you do that, the way that it's perceived, I think on the receiving end, is that you're holding someone's hand through something as opposed to telling them. And to Brent's point about leveraging partners and showing. One of the things that I'll tell you that will absolutely kill momentum is if there are major gaps in your interactions with somebody. And that's why tracking your hot sheet and having a column in there for most recent attempted contact is so critical. Like your hottest hot leads, you should be reaching out to at least a few times a week. But let's say if you get somebody progressed to that point where you have the opportunity to show them all of these things, one of the things that's working really well by doing it is like at the end of that call, it's like, hey, by the way, while we're on this call, I want to go over this thing that we need to address. And I'm actually building up the buyer representation as a super positive thing because it's protecting them and assuring them that they shouldn't have any concerns with it. And we do charge transaction fees. So we're doing all of these things on that call. And then it's like, boom, you've got basically 1/3 to 1/2 of the entire process already knocked out. When 2 days ago, they told you that they were going to hold off for another 6 months. But when I say that keeping momentum is so important, the real value add to having partners and the availability to rely on them is I'd tell them like, look, if I'm ever not able to go, I have people that I work with that will go out and go and show you homes. So I just want to set that expectation with you because I hear, unfortunately, too many people that say that they have an agent, but they're at the mercy of the agent's schedule. And in my opinion, that's not fair. And considering how much DFW is growing right now, it's so time consuming. If I had to drive to Rockwall, which I'm going to have to do tomorrow, it's an hour and a half drive one way. And that's just, it eats up so much time that could be used for prospecting and doing more of those appointments. But if you have somebody that you build somebody up and say, we're going to do these things, and then it takes you 2 weeks to be able to be available to go and show something to them, you've lost that person. So the urgency is not just showing them the timeline, but it's maintaining their high level of intent. And the longer that you have between those, those gaps getting big between most recent communication just makes them colder and colder and colder and colder every single day. So I'm going to stop right there. That's a lot of information. That's a model that we've been working on that I've been using to great success for a long time. But that overcoming objection transcends industry. That way of doing it and saying what this means to you if you were able to do something works in a variety of situations. But I want to stop there, see what questions, comments, feedback you all have.
So one of the things that I will say, I recently started doing this, and I had some of these processes already in place. But I take my first intake call with them, go through the whole buyer intake. I use the LP Mama script. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that one, but yep. Used it for years. It's very ingrained. And then, I send them a follow-up text, I send them a follow-up email, and I set them up on their MLS search. And then I also say, your homework tonight is to activate your portal search and to reach out, even if it's just a text or, reach out to here's my preferred lender, whatever, make an introduction with him. If they've already come in with a lender, make sure I've got that contact information so I can, have a conversation. I usually try to get them over to my guy too. But then I just started doing this a couple of weeks ago, and it's had great success. And I made myself a scheduled time block of different times of the day where in my Google Calendar, I can share a link with them, and it will invite them to book an appointment that's a virtual appointment with me. And we do it in Google Meets. And then, there's a note sheet that it's a Google Doc that generates as a meeting note. And I'll put in there, things that we talked about and reinforcing that, contacting the lender. And then we'll specifically go through their MLS search at that time. I'll share my screen and show them, what I've got built out for them, and we can make adjustments and whatever. and then we'll identify properties that we specifically want to go see. And I will like put them in a cart so that they, you know, we're already got our 4 or 5 properties we're going to go look at on Saturday in a cart. And then I'll book another appointment with them in my Google Calendar and invite them to the showings that we're going to go to. And then we'll also talk about the buyer rep at that time. And I'll tell them, like, you know, we're gonna go out on, you know, on Saturday before I can get these appointments finalized. I'm gonna have to send you over a required form from my office that protects you to show that, you know, that you and I are working together directly. And I haven't had one single objection about the buyer rep from there. It's been awesome. And so, you know, that I did not know that the Google Calendar had that capability until I was poking around in it about a month ago. And I was like, what is this? So it's huge amounts of success on that. I love it. And it feels very put together. And another thing that I do is when we get on the call, I will have them pull up their phone. And because a lot of times they're on the computer or an iPad or something, and I'll send them my my Zillow link, my agent profile, and I'll have I'll say, you know, go like add me as your agent on Zillow, and then that way, you know, not in a creepy way, I can see some of your favorites. And then when I'm searching for your properties, if I'm going through and curating this search, I can base off of some of your favorites that you've liked in Zillow. And it also eliminates the risk of you accidentally hitting a button and getting called from somebody that's not me. And in that, you know, and then I'll get the ad as your agent and so wants to work with you and all of that kind of stuff. So it's gone over really well.
I don't think there's any problem with driving the process. And, you know, that's one of the things that with our partner model, it's like, hey, we work a little different. Let us explain to you how we do that. And I love that. Are you using Calendly at all? Like you have a Calendly that interacts with it, or you're just using just Google? Yeah.
I don't have to use Calendly because it like if I go to it, I can just click on the link for those appointments through Google, and it just will show up. You hit, you know, share your availability and text it to them, and it pops up and it has all the appointments that I've got enabled. And I try to schedule like a couple during the, you know, the mid-morning, a couple in the early afternoon, and then a couple in the evening throughout the week, like kind of interspaced throughout the week so that they can see that I'm available. And then just go from there. I mean, it has worked out really well.
That's great. Yeah, that's fantastic. And I feel like if you are getting people to actually go to your calendar and get on your calendar, the show up rate is probably gonna be way higher and the engagement's gonna be way better because it's very purposeful. So I think that's brilliant.
And these are like a lot of the time this is like Zillow leads or Ylopo leads that are, you know, coming in and doing this.
Yeah.
And you know, so I mean, yeah, they've raised their hand because of Zillow or whatever, but they feel like that they're a part of a system, like they've stepped into my doctor's office, you know, and here's how we're going to operate. And I like to also kind of start out the conversation too with like, I have a PDF that has like, it's kind of like, it's sort of like my Zillow profile. Like I've got the same picture on this bio sheet that has my like what I've done in my career, and then also like a link to the Zillow profile that has all of my past sales. You know, and it just, to me, it feels like, okay, you have now, you've stepped into my office. Let's have this conversation, rather than, you know, flying by the seat of our pants kind of thing. Like I don't want it to feel like that I'm not a professional doing this. Like this is a,
Yeah.
So
You doing it that way is a lot different than the way most people do it. Most people are just hoping someone picks up the phone and then they go, and they have just like verbal diarrhea all over themselves. And it's tough. And but that in itself comes with practice and you're very seasoned. And so that's part of it. You're new in this business. A lot of that just comes with repetition and continuing to sharpen your skills with practice. So I do think if you're new in the business, joining a team that does online lead generation, but also trains you how to do it is great. But we also have people that will join our team and they're just not interested. Like, oh, this sounds great. And then they show up and they go, well, that's not what you said in your interview that you were going to do. And they don't last very long in this business. So people think this is an easy job. It's not. And, COVID was easy and it's gotten a lot harder. And it makes me a little concerned, if interest rates do go down, but inflation is still a thing and everything's still so expensive. And now we've got multiple offers on houses. Gosh, people being able to afford to go way over list price and way over and sign appraisal waivers. Like, I'm not necessarily thinking that's going to be a thing yet, but it could be.
Well, the FHLA just announced that we're going to be able to start using appraisal waivers on FHA loans. So I think they're getting ready for that. Yeah, and the LTV value got dropped significantly. So, I mean, I think that in my opinion, reading between the lines, that's in anticipation of a market with a bunch of buyers flooding back, that you're going to have people that probably are going to be overpaying for houses that shouldn't be. So, but Claire, I love that mentality. The thing about that, I would say, continue doing what Brent's saying, is taking it in like a professional approach. Your homework is this. A lot of people are averse to saying things like that. But again, you're asking for help. You want to move forward? We're showing you a way to move forward. Your homework is this. I need you to do this. And if you don't get it done by this time,
cut out a little bit.
So anyway, I think this is good.
I can't hear Michael. That may be me. Good stopping.
Can you hear me now?
Yep. I was going to say good stopping point.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you all so much.
Yeah, let us know if you have any questions, Claire. If you do want to talk about that model that we've been operating at a very high level, and we're going to just push the gas pedal in 2025, and it's just one of those things that's going to free us up. If you are good at prospecting and doing the things that you're doing, it's like, what's your cost per hour on certain activities? Writing offers is not one of them. Opening the door is not one of them. You can even use what we're doing to run your open houses for you. So
yeah, I've used Xiaomi before in a
pinch.
In a pinch. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's been one of those situations where I was, couldn't find anybody. I was out of town, blah, blah, blah. And so I've used them before. But I never really thought about using them as my, my primary showing vehicle. Unless it was something completely out of the area, but that is a good idea. And I always I hesitate on it only because that's an opportunity for me to meet and build rapport with them in person. Sure. And so I just don't know. I don't know.
There's some limiting beliefs in there, and it's hard for us to get over our own limiting beliefs. I have it too, and Michael's got it too. I can tell you that, Michael's $3.5 million buyer in Frisco. He's not letting a showing partner handle that, so but he can go work with someone in Waxahachie if he wants to, Sure. So there's just, there's more to it, and we're still refining it, but a whole nother conversation. But anyway, thank you everybody for the time. You got our information. We hope to see you on next week, and we're going to just keep doing this thing.
See you guys.
All right. Bye, Claire. Bye, Walker.